welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be looking at the AQA GCSE paper. So a lot of what I'm going to say is the same for all other GCSE papers. If you've watched, I imagine that many of you probably won't watch the whole series, but if, for instance, you're trying to decide what exam board to go with for yourself or your child, you might watch the whole series, and you might also realize that they all use the same skills, which is why our main course is skills based, right? You're using the same skills over and over and over again, which is really great because it means it's applicable to everything, right? This is a really popular exam board. This is what I would say most schools in England use AQA. I'm always surprised if I come across a school that doesn't use AQA. I would say some private schools or international schools will use international GCSEs. Otherwise, when it comes to sort of state schools, most schools, they will use AQA. So this one is a tried, true. There's a lot of extra resources out there for AQA, which is a big bonus here, is that if you did AQA, you would have a ton of other other resources to choose from to really help you with this. I'm also running groups if you want to have more support that. But yeah, you're going to have a ton of extra resources going on. So let's get into it. So getting into it, we are looking at paper 1, fiction. So this paper, they provide you with an insert again, and it's one text here. This one's from The Life of Pi, which is quite a popular novel. It's a good one to get to use in terms of just like reading more. A lot of really interesting ideas in this novel. It's usually, I think it is studied on some exam boards, literature. Would recommend. So they give you your extract, same thing as usual. They give you your source, right? And then you have your questions. This one is you have the questions about the reading you've done, and you've also got your questions about the writing that you're doing as well. So interestingly, this one for the writing, you do your non-fiction here, which is very strange, actually. Yeah, makes sense. It's kind of fiction, it's kind of non-fiction, a wildlife. Oh no. So for this paper, you have your reading, fiction reading, and also your fiction writing. Yeah. So getting into it, we look at section A, read from the first part of the source from lines 1 to 6. As per usual, I will say don't read the whole text until you get to question 3. Right? The whole of the text, you wait until you get to question 3. For these 2 questions, you can answer them without reading the whole text. And I recommend that because then you go into the reading with this question 3 in mind, yeah? And also this question 4 in mind, which is specific. It's lines 20 to the end, but you want to have an overall understanding of the text. So again, I would recommend not reading the source until question 3. It just makes life a bit easier. You get through it faster. You get those questions out of the way, and then you read. So this question, first part of the source, lines 1 to 6, list 4 things about hyenas from this source. So if we go down to the paper, you do 1 to 6, you make a little mark. Yeah, they've actually put the 6 in here to remind you this is where 6 ends, which is very nice. And this first paragraph. It was the hyena that worried me. I had not forgotten father's words. Hyenas attack in packs. Whatever animal can be run down. So that could be 1. They go for zebras or zebras, gooners, and water buffaloes. And not only the old or the infirm in the herd, but the full-grown members too. So that's 1, 2, 3. They are hardy attackers, rising up from the buttings and kickings immediately, never giving up for a simple lack of will. And they are clever. Anything can be distracted from its mother is good. So in this, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things you can say. So you just want to pick out 4. So for instance, I would just keep it easy, go for the first 4. They attack in packs. Yeah. They go for zebras, gnu's, I don't know what a gnu is, and water buffaloes. They go for the full-grown members as well, right? They are hardy attackers who don't give up, is what I would do for that extract. And you just write them down. Noting that here, it doesn't say in your own words, so you can just put the quotes in there, right? You can put in whatever you want in there. Just take it from the text, put it in there, boom, done, 4 marks. and then you can move on. This question hopefully should be your fastest. You can get through it quickly. This is your comprehension question. So how well you understand the text, right? What you've understood from the text, how well you've comprehended it. Which is usually for most students the easier question. It might not be so easy for students who have difficulty in understanding texts though. But this one's, they give you the lines, so it's, you can go, you can find it, you can pick it out. If you have difficulty picking it out, you want to read around a bit, you give it a bit more time, and you choose those 4 things. You don't really want to overthink this one. I've had some students in the past who have kind of found this one difficult because they're like, oh, what if I don't say the right thing? In that extract I just showed you, there's 6 things. Usually in these questions, there's more than 4 things you can say. They usually give you a couple of options. So question 2, you look at lines 10 to 19, they give you the extract, which is great. So you don't even need to flip to the extract here, you can just do it from here. So how does the writer use language here to describe the hyena's appearance? So we're looking at language. I'm also looking at sentence forms. So it's a little bit of language and a little bit of structure. They've given you 3 ideas, and you can basically just pick from those ideas they've given you. Whenever an exam paper gives you what you can include, what you could include, it's a really good way of prompting yourself. It's a really good way of being like, okay, that's what I can use. Okay, great. I would say for this extract, as it's 8 marks, you're looking at 4 quotes, looking at 4 evidences, 4 explanations, right? You get marked on those, on the evidence and the explanation. So you want to be doing peel paragraphs. It's then down to you if you want to do 4 peel paragraphs or a peel per quote. I think some students find that easier. Or if you want to do a peel on, for example, language features and techniques, a peel on sentence forms, etc. It depends on how you want to do it. Sentence forms, I'll say, is the harder one here. Sentence forms, we want to look at long sentence, short sentences, punctuation. Is it an exclamatory sentence? Is it a imperative sentence, so a command, right? But yeah, you pick out your 4 quotes basically, and then you write about them. You're using your peel. Again, we go into some more depth in the course, but it's a peel structure. So, I mean, I am big on the peel structure. I make all my students stick to the peel structure, even my A-level students, right? I use peel at university. It got me through, right? It is a tried, tested, great system. And it means that you know exactly what you're writing when. So yeah, you're going to want to go through it, pick out your 4 quotes, 4 peels about it. And again, you can combine the quotes into 1 paragraph. They're similar. For example, you might think about how the writer, language here to describe the hyena's appearance. You might look at how the writer uses a shaggy coarse coat. Yeah, that imagery, the coarse coat, the alliteration there, the kind of harsh C. And you might look at even you might expand upon that. You might say that the hyena is described as appearing as having a shaggy coarse coat in a bungled mix of colors, right? A kind of a crazy mix of colors, kind of all over the place. Looking like the symptoms of a skin disease. Yeah, they're simile. Looking like the symptoms of a skin disease. So you might do a peel paragraph, these are those 2 quotes, and then move on to something different. You can do it however you find easier. Some students like to write a peel paragraph with 1 explanation, 1 evidence. Other way around, evidence, explanation. Some students like to write 1 longer paragraph. It's up to you, right? So yeah, and you want to figure out what works for you as well in this process, and then stick to it. If it works for you, it works for you, right? Every student approaches questions differently. Now we come on to question 3. Question 3 about the whole source. So at this stage, you want to read the whole text, right? You want to read the whole text now. Once you've read the whole text, you want to be thinking about how are they using the structure to interest you as a reader. Now, again, we're going to go into some more depth in the courses, but structure is one that I think students find quite difficult because usually language, metaphors, etc., tend to be the easier thing to pick out because they're slightly more, not simplistic, but I think when you're being taught about literature from primary, they focus on those kind of language techniques, right? And here you're looking at the structure. So what I usually recommend for students to do is to focus on the beginning and the end. So end. And you might also focus on the middle. You do one paragraph on beginning, one paragraph on middle, one paragraph on end. So if in the middle something really dramatic happens, right, the climax happens, you can then take that and use it. But I would usually focus, maybe not on the first bit that you've done for your previous question. So you want to look from line 6, yeah? And you might choose, for example, the short sentence here. I could hear a hyena whining. I mean, here you've got two short sentences starting this section, right? It was the hyena that worried me. I could hear the hyena whining, and you might pick up on the fact that it's a short sentence. Why is it short? How does it draw in interest? How does it convey Pi's anxiety, right? That he's stuck on a ship with a hyena. Quite stressful. And also an orangutan and a zebra. But the hyena is the predator, right? The hyena is the one that worries him. And how does he convey that worry? How does he convey that concern through structural devices? So sentences, punctuation, paragraphing. You might say here you got quite a short paragraph, right? Followed by a longer paragraph. So we get this idea of his fear in that first paragraph. You might say, okay, we've got a short sentence here and it's followed by a really long sentence, a much longer sentence. I clung to the hope that a zebra, a familiar prey, and an orangutan, an unfamiliar one. So you might highlight the fact that they have in commas these details here, right? They've used a juxtaposition here. We've got the contrast between familiarity and unfamiliarity, right? So you can draw in on those ideas there. How are they using the structure to create that juxtaposition, that contrast? And then yeah, even here, I kept one eye on the horizon, one eye on the other side of the lifeboat. The repetition of one eye, right? One eye, this description of his concern. And then what you might do is I would usually say for a student, you want to look at the beginning and end, to be honest. So you then look at the end. Things ended in typical hyena fashion. It stopped at the stern and started producing deep groans interrupted by its heavy panting. So you might look at how is this, and abruptly it vomited, right? The vomiting was abrupt, so it was quick. How is that conveyed through the sentence being short? Because it's abrupt. The sentence itself is fast, right? And all these, and actually he's actually using a lot of really short sentences here. If we look at this first part of the paragraph, got a lot of really short sentences here to convey that anxiety, convey how quickly things are happening for him. Yeah, so you can really draw in on that. It did not move from the restricted space for the rest of the day. What are we left with in this extract? What are we left with this extract? So usually the extract will be from a novel, and usually it'll be from the middle of the novel. It might be from the start, it might be from the end, right? They'll give you an extract at a certain point in the novel, and they will always tell you where it is. So up here, they say it's from the middle of the novel. You want to also think, okay, in the middle of the novel, what might be happening? In the middle of the novel, we're getting the action. We're getting the kind of, things might be going badly wrong because it's the middle, right? We're moving up. If you think about the structure of a story, you might be shown this in primary, or you might have seen this before on the literature things, or in the narrative writing course. Yeah, you want to be following the shape of that mountain. So what the middle part of the novel is around here. So you might be drawing up to the climax, or it might be the climax. You might be thinking, okay, how is that tension coming to a head? How is that happening? If you're looking at the beginning or the end of the novel, you'll be thinking, how are they setting things up? How are they creating that interest at the beginning? Or how are they wrapping things up at the end? Or potentially at the end, there might be a cliffhanger, for example. Yeah. So we're thinking about how a story works structurally. Again, the course will go into more depth, but this is my top tip for this section, is to really beginning, I would say beginning and the end. Yeah. The development of it, and then doing a bit in the middle, how they're changing that focus as the source develops, as it goes on. But the best thing to do is do a paragraph from beginning, paragraph from middle, paragraph from end. Yeah. So you have 8 marks here. I usually say 3 paragraphs like that again, and you want to be picking out picking out 4 quotes here. So you're looking at 4 quotes, 4 evidence, 4 explanation. Yeah, simply divided. That all linked to this question, of course, but you're being marked here on the evidence and the explanation. So in that case, you might do 1 quote from the beginning, 1 feature from the beginning. You might draw in on those on those short sentences again at the beginning. You might look at how in the middle the sentence might get longer as you get more detail. At the beginning, you've got that juxtaposition between the familiar and the unfamiliar, how that conveys his worry and concern between one eye on one thing and one eye on the other thing. In the middle, you're looking at how the action is developing, what is happening with the hyenas, how he's conveying that. And at the end, how are they closing it out? And again, there you might go for short sentences. In this case, you probably want to not do short sentences for the beginning paragraph then, save them for the end. But yeah, it's a structural question. Structure, in my experience, students find a little bit more tricky. This might require a bit more practice because of that. But you also might be great at structure. You might be proving me wrong. So it depends really on where you are personally with your learning. But this is, I would say, one of the trickier questions in my experience of tutoring for this exam board. And they give you 2 pages, but you're looking at 3 paragraphs. They give you extra, again, only as needed. Yeah. You're looking at doing 3 paragraphs. Again, over here, you're looking at doing 3 or 4 peels. You could do 2 paragraphs, etc. Now we are moving on to the longer question. This one here is 20 marks. So this is your chunky question for the fiction paper when it comes to reading, right? They tell you where to read from. Again, here it's good to have that knowledge of the whole text. You will have gained that knowledge through your previous question, right? They guide you through a process here. They say to you, comprehend the details. How does language work on a smaller scale, right? How does structure work on a larger scale? And now it's going back to the smaller scale, but with regards to the whole novel. But you are only going to want to be taking your evidence from the end of the extract, right? Or evidence must come from line 20 to the end. You might, however, compare to a quote from earlier, but the bulk of your evidence is from line 20 to the end. And this is really important. So what they do with this question is they give you an opinion. This is also a question that students have difficulty on because it's a perspective, it's a point of view, right? So this one says the student says this part of the story where the hyena behaves wildly is funny rather than frightening. The writer suggests that the hyena is actually no serious threat to Pi. Right? An opinion. They're usually quite strong opinions, and they're usually based around what's going on. They might say, a student said that this extract has a mysterious tone that is chilling to read. And then you get asked, to what extent do you agree? So at this stage, you need to sit down, you need to think, right? You think, do I agree or do I disagree? And then you structure your answer around that. So you might go, okay, I agree with the writer. The hyenas are behaving wildly. And it's funny, it's entertaining to read. And then you will sit down and you will think, okay, where is my evidence for agreeing with this writer, with this student, sorry. And you'll pick out your evidence for agreeing with it. You might pick out a sentence where the hyena, where the comedy comes through, and then you write using that. What you want to do in this one, the best way to approach this question is to have a bit of a balance. So you might do, for example, it's 20 marks. I'm trying to do the maths, I'm not a maths teacher. I usually say you want about 4 paragraphs for this, and usually I would have students do 4 paragraphs, and you might do 2 agree, 2 disagree if you don't have a strong opinion. If you have a really strong opinion and you really disagree or agree, you might do 3 your opinion, like whichever side you're on, right? So if you really agree, you might do 3 paragraphs on how much you agree, and then 1 paragraph on the other side. You want to have that balance, right? You want to have a balance between your opinion, but also open up to what the student's opinion might also reveal about the text. Because this question makes you think, right? Having read what we read just then, I don't think this sounds very funny. He's on a boat with a hyena. I'd be very scared. So I would probably go into, I disagree with this question. I disagree with this quote because of the way the hyena is being portrayed, because of how the writer is using this kind of, these short, stressful sentences. Again, you don't want to repeat though. You want to make sure you don't repeat from the last question. So you want to use these quotes in a different way. And then I might say, but also I agree because, I don't know, a quote that's funny, for example. Yeah. So again, consider your impressions of how the hyena behaves. So how is the hyena being portrayed? How is the hyena being portrayed in this? Is the hyena being portrayed as being really scary, or is the hyena being portrayed as being kind of funny? I like this question because I always associate hyenas with laughter because of the Lion King and that like laughing, that like manic laughter they have in the Lion King. So it's quite a good question actually. And then how the writer presents the threat of the hyena to Pi. And again, you have the ideas here. You can use those ideas. You could even do 2 paragraphs on how the hyena behaves, then referring back to the text, or you could do 2 paragraphs on how it's a threat to the hyena. You want to, I think, in this question, you want to be doing more. I take it back. You're doing 3 paragraphs, and you're doing 2 on which slide you're on, 1 on the other side, and you're going to be doing peel paragraphs. Now, I always get my students to do a peel paragraph because it helps you develop your argument. So you want to have, basically for this one, you want 6 pieces of evidence, 6 explanations, yeah? And then it's about your links. So you've got 3 links, 3 kind of point sentences that you're going to get marked on for how well they apply to the question. And then 3 link sentences, again, how well they apply to the question. How well, in a way, I think it's the link to the question, but also it's the evaluation of opinion, right? You're evaluating your opinion, you're evaluating a student's opinion. So you're going to want to be doing 3 longer paragraphs here. You're going to want to do 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph, yeah, that are connected. You're expanding on your answer. And this is a really good tip that I give my students to make sure you are fully developing your answer. Because if you don't develop it very well, you're not going to get those higher marks. You want to make sure that your answer is really developed, really strong in that way. And doing a peel rather than a peel helps with that. With the other ones, it's not as necessary, but here it's necessary. And then, yeah, 2, which slide you're on. So say you agree, you do 2 on agree, 1 on disagree. So you have a balance of opinions because you're looking at evaluation of opinion as well. And yeah, it's quite a long section of the paper is dedicated to this, like quite a few pages. So yeah, you're writing some chunky paragraphs here. Yeah, 3 paragraphs, 3, yeah. With this one, I would say you also probably want a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of conclusion. So your introduction might look like, I agree with this student because I think that the hyenas are portrayed as being I'm going to go disagree actually. I disagree with this student because I believe the hyenas are being portrayed as being terrifying and threatening, and through Pi's perspective of them, through Pi's fear of them. And then you would write the paragraphs and you get to paragraph 3 and you go, however, through this quote here, I can see where the student's coming from. Not in those words because that's very colloquial. Through this quote here, I can understand the student's opinion. And I can kind of see where it's coming from in that way. And then you do a little conclusion. In conclusion, I agree or disagree with the statement because you list out your evidence. Yeah. So this one, I think you can do a short introduction and conclusion based around, do you agree or disagree? So short intro and conclusion around whether you agree or disagree. Yeah. And then that is a good structure to follow with this. And again, peels, please. It just really develops the ideas in a really good way. And it makes you, if you get to your first piece of evidence, challenge yourself, write moreover after you get through your first piece of evidence and make yourself fill in that gap. Moreover, the hyenas being portrayed as frightening through this quote here. Yeah. So with this one, I would break it up into that first part of the statement, funny rather than frightening. And then no serious threats. I'll do my first paragraph on how they're threatening. Well, how they're scary. Second paragraph on how they're threatening to Pi. And that third paragraph on how they could be funny. Right? Because you want to also show you can understand a different opinion. And then with this one, I would say you want to pick out your keywords in this. So I think, to me, the keywords here, you've got funny, frightening, threat. Yeah. And then I'd write my paragraphs around those words. And in most of these questions, they will provide you with keywords like that. It will usually have enough in there to make you think about it, to make you think, oh, okay, what are they saying? And you go into the keywords there. So I do one paragraph on frightening, one paragraph on threat, one paragraph on funny. The first two against the opinion. Here, a lot of students struggle with saying, this is my opinion, right? This is a difficult thing to do. I think you're not always taught to do that, but you need to come in here and you go, this is my opinion. If you write this piece without having an opinion, it won't be as strong. So if you don't have an opinion, try and make one. If you kind of like, I don't really know. I'm kind of on this side, I'm kind of on that side. Pick a side that you think is more convincing. Against is usually in some ways easier to argue because it's more like controversial. And then 2 for, 2 against. Sorry, 2 for, 1 against. Yeah. Yeah. So that is my advice on this one. You want to reread line 20 to the end. You want to pick out the keywords from this question. And then you want to think, do I agree? Do I disagree? And then structure 3 peel paragraphs around that with 2 pieces of evidence. You need to do 2 pieces of evidence. And then we move on from that and we come to our writing section. So in this writing section, you've got 45 minutes, which is really great to kind of break down the time limits. Again, in your booklet, I'm going to give you a suggested breakdown of time limits. So you have an idea of what to do with your timings. I will calculate it and use what I've done in the past to create a good timing. And in my timings, I'm also going to include things like reading time, and also rereading time, because it's important to plan a little bit to pick out the different quotes before you start to get started. And it's also important to leave yourself enough time to read over to make sure you're doing all the spag stuff, spelling, grammar, punctuation. Yeah. And then we come to writing. This is the creative writing section. This is where you use your creative writing skills. For this question, they usually give you a kind of scenario. It's usually a creative writing competition, actually. And you get an image and you also get a kind of more general question. This, to me, the image is usually a descriptive writing piece. So we've looked at it previously with Cambridge, who split their creative writing section into 2 very clearly. Here again, you've got your descriptive writing piece and you've got your narrative writing piece. And my biggest piece of advice, if you have a student who struggles with creative writing, who might not have much time before the exam to work on creative writing, is to go through both courses. When you're practicing, choose one to practice more. Because I've had students in the past who don't like narrative writing, who like descriptive writing. Descriptive writing, you get more ideas from seeing the image, right? Whereas with narrative writing, it's more about what you can imagine, which is sometimes harder for students to kind of grasp. So my piece of advice when it comes to revision is to revise both, but revise one more. You want to have a form, one of them that you really kind of work on, that you know will be more reliable, and then you use both a narrative and a descriptive piece. Use a bit of the other one. You can't really have a good description without a little bit of action. Again, the creative writing course will go into that in more detail. I'll be showing you guys how to do my favorite technique with students, which is zooming in, zoomed in, which is a really simple way. You start with the big, you start with what's the weather like? How does the zoo look? Obviously, we can't see from this image, but I remember it's a cartoon image and there's loads of different animals around. How do they start from that big place of the weather, the temperature, all these different things, zooming in, you're zooming in on something smaller. How does it feel looking, seeing the hyenas in the zoo, for example? You see the hyenas, you see the elephants, you see the meerkats. I like meerkats. And then you go into the zoomed in, which is where you're thinking about how the person in the scene, the character in the scene, it could be in first person or in third person, is feeling what they might be eating, what they might be touching, right? Think about the senses. You're zoomed out, you're looking at sight. Zooming in, you're thinking about maybe sound a bit more, maybe a little bit of smell, and then you're zoomed into the character's perspective and you're thinking about what are they maybe eating? Maybe they might be eating a hot dog or something. Maybe they might be feeling cold, or they might be feeling really, really hot, or they might be feeling the cold water bottle they have. Yeah. And you want to do it like that. And again, I'll go into some more detail. Whereas the narrative structure, you're more thinking about that shape of that story and action, characters, dialogue. So it's, yeah, but I've got some techniques for creative writing, for prescriptive writing. I know that Lucy has some techniques for narrative writing. So yeah, it's a bit of both. So we'll go into that in more detail in the creative writing course, but that's a good tip is the for the descriptive writing that I'll go into in more depth. And that is your paper one. Again, very similar skills to all the other papers. This one, the only difference that this one does, AQA is quite unique in the sense they do an opinion. This is not in every single exam paper. This is the harder bit because it's requiring you to really stand by an opinion, right? Which is hard. It's hard to go, I have this opinion and I'm confident in this opinion, which is what you need to do with this question. But overall, this is a really nice paper. Again, it's popular for a reason. It's popular for a reason that it's accessible, it's interesting, and it's a good choice. And again, used by most schools. So yeah, we're going to come back next time and have a little look at nonfiction. And I will see you then. All right, bye-bye.